Hello there, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to our AT&T specific webinar. My name is Sam, and I'll be your moderator today. In just a minute, we will be joined by Patrick Ray, who is one of our senior financial advisors here, and he is going to be speaking to AT&T employees about how to avoid some of the common pitfalls that can be made within your 401k. But before Patrick comes on, I'd like to very quickly just remind you that we are not affiliated nor endorsed by AT&T. The Retirement Group is a completely independent group of financial advisors. Please keep that in mind as you're listening along with Patrick today. Throughout his presentation, I will be entering some links into the chat. Feel free to pop that open if you'd like. There will be several different resources added into that chat. They will guide you to several different links, but one of which may simply just be the link to book an appointment with Patrick or one of his colleagues if you wish, once this webinar has ended. And after Patrick's presentation, I will rejoin him quickly to ask him some of the questions that come through the Q&A box. Feel free to also pop that one open if you wish. You can ask away in that Q&A box. It is completely anonymous, and Patrick will try to answer as many questions as he can, time permitted, of course. We do like to keep these presentations short to get you out to enjoy your day. And I think with all of that out of the way, I am going to now turn off my camera so Patrick can get started.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon. Hopefully everyone's having a great day, and we appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon. I'll try to keep it respectfully short to the greatest degree I can, but we certainly want to talk about what surprisingly is a common mistake that we see on unfortunately a too regular of a basis, if I'm being honest. I mean, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've met with over 10,000 AT&T employees during that window, and you'd be shocked to find out how many of you are missing the free money that's available to you or not taking advantage of what's available in your 401k. And as it turns out, you have a platform at AT&T to be part of one of the most flexible platforms that are available in any corporation that you could work for. AT&T is unique to this matter, and I'm happy to talk further about that maybe at the end. But what we want to talk about today specifically are these 5 big mistakes that we see on a fairly regular basis. One of them is missing out on your 401k match. We're going to talk a little bit about early withdrawal penalties, because this is a thing that comes up pretty frequently. Not consolidating multiple 401ks of vendors or people that you've worked with in the past prior to getting to AT&T. And also within the framework of AT&T, having too much of AT&T stock, which sometimes could be a peril that we don't want to have. And then in addition to all of those things, failing to rebalance or look at our 401k on somewhat of a regular basis. And so missing out on the 401k match might be one of the biggest mistakes that we see on a regular basis, which is not contributing enough inside the plan from your paycheck to get the free money that AT&T is going to give you. And we all know in the most recent few years, AT&T is a completely different company than when you first started, right? But the fact is they give you free money, and there is literally no excuse for not participating in the plan to at least get this free money. And so as long as you're putting in enough money to equal the 80% match that they have up to the 6% that they give you, you're at least getting 100% rate of return on your money, right? Which is clearly something that we're all striving for in the grand scheme of what you're trying to produce as a rate of return in your overall investments inside your 401k. So making sure that you take an action to contribute and to meet the threshold is easily one of the biggest priorities that we want to make with respect to missing out on the 401k match. So let's make sure we address that. Triggering early withdrawal penalties are relevant to a few things. And so some of you may not know that you can take a loan against your 401k to avoid this particular issue. But some people are just like, hey, I want to pay cash for a car and I want the money. And so you pay taxes, of course, because the money's coming from your 401k or a qualified plan source. And then in addition to that, you're not 59.5, so it costs you a 10% penalty, which unfortunately will be attributable to the next year when you file this year's tax returns. And so ideally, you want to employ the options that you have, right, to avoid these things, like considering a loan from your 401k or considering borrowing money from a bank, a personal loan and or a car loan or a home loan, or a home equity loan as an example of all of those things that you might want to consider before you take a technical withdrawal from your 401k to incur potential tax and penalty problems. So this is one of the mistakes for sure that we want to avoid, hopefully at all costs. Not consolidating multiple 401ks is a problem because compound interest is your friend, okay? And the more money that you have working in compounding upon one another to get to your overall goals and objectives, the better off you're going to be long term. And so consolidation allows you to pull all of those assets together and help you from a efficiency perspective manage those funds. But in addition, it could potentially lower your costs because you might be paying for fees inside the plan to have multiple 401ks that all have the S&P 500 as an example in one of the holdings. And so clearly we have an option to, if you are available or if it's an option for you to pull all these funds together and get compound interest working into your favor. And so whether you do that in an IRA, which is an individual retirement account where you control the investments, and often relationships that we have that start with folks who are working at AT&T happen on this level, or it's better for you maybe potentially just to dump all of the old 401k monies into your existing 401k at Fidelity that you have. So those are all things that we want to consider, and that's certainly one of the mistakes that we wanted to address today. Investing too much in company stock. I don't need to tell you that the most recent transactions that AT&T has made over the last 5-ish years or so have impacted the company's stock and the stock price specifically. And so, of course, if you have the time, I would encourage you, if you actually have AT&T stock inside your 401k, you can go look at the cost basis, which is the effective amount that you've put in. And it will give you a very quick wake-up call as to how much you've put in versus how much the stock is actually worth. And so being careful about being over invested as to a percentage of what this makes up to your entire net worth would be a key that we want to avoid at all costs if we can. So over investing in any company stock, and this is not necessarily just an AT&T thing, but any company stock specifically. It just so happens that all of you work for AT&T that you're watching today, and so that's relevant to us, right? So we want to be cognizant of the fact that we're putting potentially too much money inside the guidelines of what might be comfortable for you, and this is often where we see the disconnect between what you're willing to assume from a risk perspective versus the risk that you're technically taking. Okay. So one of the big takeaways from this particular slide and this particular discussion is reviewing how much you have, and if you hadn't already done so, creating a threshold to allow you to be comfortable owning 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe up to 10% of the company stock inside your portfolio and no more. And so when we go to rebalance our plans, then we can obviously rebalance out of the funds from your AT&T stock into the other funds that you have, like the total U.S. stock fund or the AT&T U.S. stock fund or the total your bond fund that's in there, or any of the other funds that are available. And it will allow you to diversify your risk, which is helping mitigate your risk and overall management of your retirement assets. And failing to do this is also one of our mistakes that we want to talk about today, which is not addressing the balance, because things could get out of whack, so to speak, from the percentages of what you're comfortable with. So you may have initially said, I'm comfortable with 70% of my money in stocks and 30% of my money in bonds. But if we have a run up in the stock market where now that represents 80% of the company or the balances that you have in total in equities or stocks, and now you only have 20% of your balance in fixed income or in bond related investments, you can see that this is a pretty significant change. So in other words, your risk on the scale of 1 to 10 has moved 1 full point. So now instead of being a 7, you're an 8. And for those of you who then in turn ride the diversity of not putting money in additional assets and then having a retraction in the stock market where your portfolio goes down, you may be uncomfortable with that. And unknowingly to you, by this run up in the stock market in the past and not or being responsible to look into your rebalancing as far as what your portfolio is mixed in is not good. And you need to review this on a regular basis. And if needed, frankly, just set a reminder on your calendar on your phone for once a year, and do it in April or do it in June or do it in September, excuse me, or whatever the time frame may be that you're comfortable with, so that it gives you an action item to take place and to rebalance or at least look at the portfolio mix that you have, so you don't get out of whack with respect to the allocation and make the account far more aggressive than you actually wish it to be. So action steps of things that we've just covered. Recap the 5 common mistakes of the penalties that could be incurred if you're not looking at alternatives to how to get access to the money, making sure you're making the most of the deposits in your 401k from the free money that AT&T is giving you, the withdrawal situation, which we talked about as far as the penalties are concerned, rebalancing of your portfolio, and consolidating multiple accounts in the event that you have them, right? So we want to take proactive steps in an effort to make the transition of when you ultimately leave the payroll from an employee to a retiree, that you're doing so in the most efficient way possible. And so if you are looking for help or a partner in retirement in an effort to do that, that's what we're here to do, right? So we know that statistically, most people over the age of 50 don't have a written financial plan. And frankly, there's no excuse for that, because firms like ours do this as a way to introduce their services to you. So if you're willing to invest some time with them or us, we are willing to give back to you a financial plan to kind of give you an overview and a stress test of where you are financially to see if you're on track to meet your overall goals and objectives. And so if you were considering a partner and you wanted to know why you may consider the retirement group, is because we have a ton of knowledge in helping people specifically from AT&T. We have offices all across the country, and many of myself and my coworkers are extremely familiar with your pension plans and how they work and how they're credited, and your retirement benefits from a 401k perspective, and your medical plans, and all of these things that would help you in some of the most important financial decisions that you have to make when you're trying to transition ultimately at some point into retirement. And so take advantage of our complimentary analysis because we offer it to you, and you should do so if you hadn't already done so. And so you can reach out to us by emailing us at info@theretirementgroup.com. You can call us at 800-900-5867, or you can schedule a time that's convenient for you by taking a picture of this QR code to the left. It will get you access to either my calendar or one of my teammates' calendars to schedule some time that's convenient for you to overlook your situation. And then if you're not already following us on LinkedIn, we have a ton of great material that gets updated on a regular basis there, that I encourage you to take a picture of that QR code to the right to get you access to that if you're not already following us on LinkedIn. And so finally, before I pass this back to Sam to see if we have any questions for the afternoon, just know that your 401k is one of the two biggest pools of capital that you're going to effectively rely on when you transition into retirement, right? The pension being the other one, assuming that you're eligible to have a pension at the company. And so it is of great concern that you make a priority to address these things and at least review them on a regular basis. And if you don't know how to do it, or you don't know what to do, that's what we're here to help you with. And so please reach out to us at one of those ways that I shared with you here just a few minutes ago, in an effort to get some help in the event that you're looking for it. Okay. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sam before we let you go to see if we have any questions for the afternoon. Sam?
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, let's answer just a couple questions. This first one, how can I be sure I'm taking full advantage of AT&T's 401k match?
Participate. That's the easiest solution, right? And the way you do that is you can log into Fidelity. If you're not familiar with that, we'll help you get logged in. But basically logging into Fidelity, and in the contributions section, you can see what you're allocating out of your paycheck. And it's as easy as just making sure that the number that says pre-tax match says 6. And so what you're doing is putting in the max that the company would allow you to participate in. And so therefore you're taking advantage of 100% of the free money they give you.
Thank you. Alrighty, number 2. How can I arrange for my estate to be as tax efficient as possible, given that I have $1 million in my 401k?
Great question. Congratulations to you. That's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and you've done a dynamite job at saving, which is great. And so I can appreciate your question. And what you want to start thinking about, if you hadn't already done so, is looking at what we refer to as a tax efficient retirement. And we've got a webinar that we talk about this, so I'd encourage you to check that out at your leisure, which you can do by the links that Sam dropped into the chat. But to answer your question specifically about how to make it the most tax efficient, remember, if you put all your money in pre-tax, you're going to pay income tax when you take it out. It doesn't matter what status or when you do that. So the bigger question is, how could you potentially leverage timing between the time that you retire and, say, your minimum distribution age, which for many of you on this webinar will be age 75 because of the changes in the most recent few years. We could potentially put together a strategy to extract as much from your IRAs and be converted into Roth IRAs, assuming that that we can do this in a tax efficient manner to keep you from paying an exorbitant amount of income tax in one given tax year. That the estate planning side of thing would correlate with that. In other words, if we're moving money from your IRAs to your Roths from a conversion perspective, of course, the efficiency of that leads down to whom will end up with your monies when you die would be certainly not only a tax efficient version, but it would apply to the estate planning and making the most efficient version of your estate planning needs. And so that's a way more detailed question than what I just gave the answer to, but hopefully that generalization gave you an overview where if you have your beneficiary set up on both the primary and the contingent version of that, then we would just simply need to talk further about how the beneficiaries would end up from a tax efficient perspective with the most money, and we can help you do that.
All righty. Thank you, Patrick. We're going to do one more. Taking into account my 401k funds, how can I budget for healthcare costs in my retirement?
Ugh, carefully. Unfortunately, they're obnoxiously expensive, and this is probably our primary concern for most of our people who are trying to plan an exit strategy, right? And ultimately land in retirement. And so what I would encourage you to do is to run a cash flow analysis if you haven't already done so, and specifically make sure that there's a line item that represents your healthcare costs over and above your normal monthly cash flow needs, right? So in other words, let's say you need $4,000 a month, but that doesn't cover your healthcare costs. And let's say currently you're paying $500 a month for healthcare. Show the $4,000 a month in cash flow needs for all ordinary expenses. Show another line item that says you need $1,000 a month, for example, for healthcare purposes. So now technically you need a net $5,000. And hopefully that analysis that we show you that's amortizing the interest that you're earning on your investments, in addition to compounding interest with respect to the cost of living adjustments, that you can see what it looks like over your life expectancy, right? So unfortunately, there's no correct or defined answer other than we would encourage you to plan for it. So if you haven't already thought through what your potential expenses are, let's over or grossly overestimate them. Like consider what you're currently paying now and put a multiple of 2 or 3 or 4 times. The more conservative you are, the more multiple you want to put, and say if you're currently paying 5 and you think you might need to pay 1,500 and you want to know if you can afford to do that, then let's put a separate line item that shows you're needing $1,500 a month for healthcare plus the $4,000 a month in normal expenses, and then see what that looks like over your life expectancy. Now, full disclosure, I'm not confident that you'll like the results in the event that you haven't saved as much as you're comfortable saving in retirement, but at least it gives us a start, right? So, well, you don't know what you don't know in the old context. So what we want to do is focus on what we can control, and what we can control is what a little bit of what we talked about today, and maximizing one of those pools of money that you're going to rely on, which is your 401k. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you, Patrick. And as a reminder, the link to book an appointment and have that cash flow analysis run is in the chat. So please take advantage of that. That was all we had today, Patrick. Any last final thoughts before we go?
I do not. We covered
Okay.
a nice bit of material in a pretty short window, but in the end, you need to maximize your 401k. And I did fail to point out that I do want to point out, which I apologize for. I said that at the beginning, AT&T has one of the most flexible planning options with respect to the platform. And that's because most people don't know that even though the IRS says that you can afford to put in, or you can put in 26,000 and some change, depending on how old you are, the IRS technically says you can put in north of 65,000 and some change. So in other words, of the money that you put in, once you hit the pre-tax limits, you can overfund your 401k at the company. So if you can afford to do that, by all means. No one that we've ever talked to retired with too much money. So the more you put in that pool of assets or money, the better off you're going to be long term. And so with that, we'll let you go for the afternoon. We hope you found some value in spending some time with us. And until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Patrick.
No problem.